Before Romeo and Juliet, there was Deirdre, the woman whose beauty would tear apart kingdoms. This is her story. Hello everyone, and welcome to Ancient Whispers. I am so glad you're here for my very first video. On this channel I will be retelling old tales, myths and legends, some of which I grew up hearing and fell in love with. To begin, we start with a tale from the Ulster cycle of Irish mythology, and that is the tragic Irish legend, Deirdre of the Sorrows. Tales of doomed love have long been a staple of many myths, legends and stories, and Irish mythology is no exception to this. Long before Shakespeare wrote his famous tragedy, there was Deirdre, a woman whose beauty and love would bring to ruin heroes and shatter their bonds of loyalty. Our story begins in ancient Ulster, during the reign of King Conabhar mac Nessa, who, while only having been in power for a year after taking over from his foster father, had built a reputation of being wise and fair, so loved by his people that they would often throw feasts in his honour and invite him into their homes. One of these feasts was held by a man called Felimid the Harper. Conabhar and his warriors, the famed Red Branch, attended Felimid's feast, and during this feast, Felimid, swelling with pride, declared that his wife was expecting their very first child. To bless this occasion, Felimid requested Conabhar's druid Chatabad to share with them a prophecy for their child. Chatabad, with the king's blessing, placed a hand on the expectant mother and spoke. The child will be a girl named Deirdre, the most beautiful woman to have ever lived. But an excess of anything can be deadly, and her beauty would cause such strife that even the mighty Red Branch would be torn apart. At this revelation, the members of the Red Branch, who were so devoted to each other, cried out in despair and shock that this child could not be born to prevent all the trouble that was to come. But Conabhar, wanting to be seen as a wise and fair ruler, stopped them, saying he could not wish or order the life of an infant be destroyed, especially in the house of their father. So instead, when the child was born, he would take her himself and raise her in secret. And if she came to be as beautiful as prophesied, he would marry her and place her in such a high position that none other would dare look upon her. When Deirdre was born, she was taken away by Conabhar and placed in the care of his old nurse, Laurelin, who would raise Deirdre in the mountain forests away from all others. Deirdre was raised in solitude, with the only people she would see being Laurelin, her elderly mute helper, and King Conabhar when he would come to visit them. While Deirdre had very much grown to become very beautiful as was prophesied, she never knew that she was special and destined to tear the Red Branch apart. It wasn't until she was almost a woman that Laurelin, to mark the special occasion, had sent for a cow to be prepared for a feast. During the preparation of the cow, Deirdre had a vision of the only man she would give her full love and devotion to. This man would need to have black hair like a raven, skin as white as snow, and cheeks as red as blood. After having this vision of the man she was going to love, Deirdre asked Laurelin if she knew of a man like this. Laurelin, unable to deny Deirdre anything she asked for, told her of the youngest son of Uznik, a warrior of the Red Branch. He was said to be young, brave and beautiful. His name was Nias, and he was inseparable from his brothers Enil and Arden. Deirdre begged Laurelin to let her see Nias, but Laurelin denied her, saying she was to be married to Conabhar and would see Nias when Conabhar took her from their home. Deirdre did not relent, however, saying she did not love Conabhar, and Laurelin, having a deep care and a motherly love for Deirdre, relented. So on her visiting to Eamon Macha, the home of Conabhar and the Red Branch, she told Nias and his brothers of a secret and rich hunting spot in the mountain. When Laurelin returned to Deirdre, she told her of this hunting ground and her opportunity to see Nias, but warned her to remain hidden and not be seen by him. When the day came for Nias and his brothers to begin their hunt, and upon entering a clearing, where Deirdre had been waiting and spying on them, Deirdre fell immediately in love with the young Nias, and before Lorelin could stop her, she entered the clearing, calling out to Nias. Nias, upon hearing the most beautiful voice call out to him, turned in surprise, only to be face to face with the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Both Deirdre and Nias fell into deep conversation and fell deeply in love with each other. Deirdre, not wanting to be separated from Nias, asked him to flee with her away from Ulster and King Conobar, as she did not love him. Nias, while falling in love with Deirdre, was torn between his duty to the king and his fellow warriors of the Red Branch. He denied Deirdre, but Deirdre would not take no for an answer, and she cast a geasa on him. With this geasa, Nias decided to flee Ulster, as far from Conobar as they could. Nias's brothers refused to be separated from each other, so they fled along with them, along with all their companions and retainers. So they fled away from Ireland, for in Ireland they would never be safe from Conobar. They made their way to Scotland and pledged themselves to the service of Scotland's king. While they served faithfully and with great prowess, they never once stayed in the fort of the king instead, returning each night to the wilderness, where Deirdre had made a home for her and Nias, and she cooked them fine meats and food every night. However, the Scottish king, growing suspicious of Nias and his brothers for not staying in the fort, had spies follow them into the wilderness, where they reported back to the king for having seen the most beautiful woman to ever have lived. The king, becoming envious and wanting Deirdre for himself, but knowing he could not kill Nias and his brothers, for they served him faithfully, instead placed them on the front line of every battle that was fought, hoping that they would perish. But so skilled were they in battle that not once could they be harmed. Deirdre, learning of these battles, warned Nias of the king's plans and urged them all to flee again. This time they fled deeper into the wilderness, before coming to rest on an island between Scotland and Ireland, and here they stayed for a time, making a home for themselves. Meanwhile, back in the lands of Conobar, the king was furious. Even though it had been years since Deirdre and her brothers had fled, none could speak to him about Deirdre or the Uasinic sons. None but Fergus MacRaig, who had spent countless hours and days arguing for Conobar to forgive the sons and allow them to return home in safety. It was only after years of tenacious arguments and reasoning from Fergus that Conobar relented, allowing them to return under the protection of Fergus, and with this Fergus set out immediately to find the brothers in Scotland and have them return. However, this very same night, Deirdre had a vision of a raven leaving Ireland and flying to Scotland with 3 drops of honey. But when the raven landed in Scotland, the honey turned to blood. Fergus eventually landed on the same island as Deirdre and the Uasinic sons, and he called out, "Conobar forgives!" He called it out so loudly that all on the island may hear him. Upon hearing a man shout, Nias believed it to be an Irishman, but Deirdre tried to convince him otherwise, that it was in fact a Scottish man. Fergus called out a second time, with Nias hearing now not only an Irishman, but an Ulster man. Again, Deirdre tried to convince him otherwise, but Fergus called out a third and final time, and with this Nias recognised the voice of Fergus MacRaig, one of his oldest friends from the Red Branch, and he rushed to meet him along with his brothers. Fergus told the brothers that Conobar had forgiven them, and he welcomed them to return under his protection. The brothers were delighted in this, for they missed their home and their old companions, but Deirdre tried to stop them, telling them of her vision, but Nias and the brothers ignored her, saying her vision was nothing but the imagination of a woman. And so they returned to Ulster and the lands of Conobar with Fergus. During this voyage home, Deirdre remained facing in the direction of Scotland, the only land she had come to live in peace, and she would sing out a lament for her adopted home of lochs and mountains. When they landed in Ulster, they were not greeted by Conabar as they had expected to be. No great feast awaited them, only Lowrlin, who instructed Deirdre to cover her face and keep it covered at all times. Lowrlin then instructed him to head to the Speckled House, where the warriors of the Red Branch hung their weapons and trophies from battle. While in the Speckled House, Deirdre and Niece passed the time by playing some games together and speaking of their futures to come. Lowrlin returned to Conabar, who had spent the months that Fergus was away debating if to forgive or seek revenge on the sons of Uisnech, and so he asked Lowrlin, what of Deirdre? Was she still the greatest of beauties? Lowrlin, wanting to protect Deirdre, lied and told him the years in the wilderness were not kind to her, and that she had become a hag with grey and weathered skin. Her hair is coarse like a horse's mane, and her teeth, that at her left, have become yellow and blackened. Conabar, on hearing this, had his jealousy abated, but he also did not trust Lowrlin, as he knew she cared deeply for Deirdre. So he sent a spy to the Speckled House to check and see if Deirdre was still beautiful. Nias, on seeing a man peek through the window at them, threw a piece from the game he was playing, and it struck the man in the eye, causing it to fall from its socket. The spy rushed to Conabar, and with his eye missing, told the king it was a small price to have paid. Seeing such a beauty, he would have gladly given both. On hearing that Deirdre was still as beautiful as ever, Conabar flew into a rage from his jealousy, and ordered the warriors of the Red Branch to attack Nias and his brothers in the Speckled House. On hearing this order to attack their former friends and companions, half the Red Branch refused Conabar, and so ashamed were they of their king's cruelty and jealousy, they immediately left the lands of Ulster and entered the service of Conabar's greatest enemy, Queen Maeve of Connacht. The remaining warriors of the Red Branch began their attack on the Speckled House, and upon seeing the warriors approach, Nias and his brothers formed an impenetrable circle around Deirdre, that no matter how fierce an attack, the Red Branch could not harm any of the sons of Uisnech, and each warrior that attempted to get close would be met with spear, sword and shield. During this battle, Fergus MacRaech's son Fiacha engaged Conabar's son in personal combat, but upon seeing the son of the king being attacked, Conabar's most loyal warrior struck Fiacha down dead, only to realise it was the son of his friend Fergus. So in turn, he turned to Conabar's son and struck him down dead with the battle cry of "A king's son for a king's son." He then too withdrew from the battle and joined the other members of the Red Branch in Connacht. Conabar, after seeing the death of his son, knew he could not best the sons of Uisnech in battle, and so called on aid from his druid Catabad to end the battle. Catabad agreed with Conabar, with the one condition being that he cannot kill the Uisnech brothers. Conabar agreed to this, telling the druid he wished to forgive them, and Nias only had to apologise. Catabad cast a spell that cast Deirdre and the Uisnech brothers in a black and hungry sea, and with this, Nias placed Deirdre upon his shoulders, and they began the swim for safety. But while swimming, they had to continue to fight off their foes, and exhaustion quickly caught up on them, and their weapons quickly slipped from their hands. And with this, the battle came to an end. Conabar's men surrounded them, and Conabar declared he would not kill them himself as he had promised, but he would pay a fortune to any man that would. But none of the men of the Red Branch would step forward, and for an age the world stood still, until a son of Norway stepped up and declared he would be the one to do it, for the Uisnech sons had in a previous battle fought and killed his brothers and father. With this, the sons of Uisnech lamented not in their own deaths, but those of their brothers, and all begged to be the first so as not to have to live a moment longer than their brothers. It was Nias who, with his own sword that had been enchanted to cut any object with ease, offered it to the Norwegian executioner so that they may all be ended at the same moment. With one fell swoop, the Uisnech brothers were no more, and Conchobar had them buried where they fell. Conchobar then took Deirdre, who had become mute and given to despair, onto his chariot and travelled toward his home. During this chariot ride, Deirdre, who could not bear to live without Nias, her only beloved, broke free of Conchobar's grip and threw herself from the chariot off a cliff onto the jagged rocks below, ending her life. Deirdre was buried by Llewellyn next to Nias and his brothers, but Conchobar, still fueled by jealousy, drove wooden stakes between Deirdre and Nias, for even in death he could not bear them to touch. But the stakes grew roots down into the graves, and 2 trees grew from these, becoming entangled together from then until today. And with that sad ending, we come to the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this. If you have, let me know in the comments. Your likes and thoughts will help me share many more tales from the past. This has been Ancient Whispers.